And Chris, thank you so much. I mean, there's so much to talk about with you two and all the credentials, Brock especially. It's always a pleasure. And I'm going to leave you two to it, but thank you so much for appearing. And, it's always a pleasure on our end, and it's great to hear your insights, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. I appreciate that introduction, man. Thank you. And it's going to be an interesting conversation here with Mr. Brock Pearson. We just got to follow Adam Manka, Nick Spanos, Trent Poole, and Brittany Kaiser. And Brittany's actually Brock's campaign manager, which is something we'll get into. My name is Chris Rice. For anybody who's unfamiliar with me, I'm the host of Rice TVX, formerly Rice Crypto. And today I am joined by the one and only Mr. Brock Pierce. Some of you might know Brock Pierce. I'm pretty sure if you're involved in cryptocurrency, you do. But in case you don't, he's been involved in the entertainment industry and movies and video games, virtual currencies and video games, and collecting virtual assets. He's been involved in the first ICO with Mastercoin, the first stable coin with USDT, and one of the first big crypto exchanges, Mt. Gox, also EOS. What's going on, Brock? How are you doing today?
I guess, happy holidays is what's going on. 2020 is about over. And so I'm grateful to be here and excited by the prospects of 2021. There is light at the end of this tunnel. We're almost through this year.
That is an excellent way to start things off, I will definitely say. One, I appreciate your time, and I want to thank the Blockchain Center. This is the Hack the Holidays Hackathon, and it will be going on this evening as well as tomorrow, and you can watch on the YouTube channel for Blockchain Center. I also want to thank Nick Spanos and Anna Ginsberg as well, and everyone involved at the center that make everything possible. So, Brock, we've got a lot to talk about. Where do you want to start? Do you want to talk about your presidential run and kind of get into some blockchain voting? Is there something in particular that's kind of hitting on you that you want to talk about?
That sounds like a great place to start.
Okay. So for anybody who's unfamiliar, I did do an interview with Brock a couple months ago on my channel, and I would definitely encourage people to check that out. But how did everything ended up going on your end from your perspective? I know you kind of entered the race late, and as Nick was kind of talking earlier, this was kind of almost an experiment for you to kind of get your feet wet to kind of see how this whole system works. So I'd like to hear it from you directly.
Well, I think that how Nick described things is accurate. And so I entered the race on July 4th, an auspicious day for an independent candidate. And this was an experimental run. This was a trial run. And I'd say that I guess the test run is complete. I've passed the first test. And this is not a minor thing. When you run for president of the United States, you are stepping into the ultimate ring of fire, the arena of all arenas, the Coliseum of all Coliseums. And there are no assurances that you're going to come out the other side intact. You may lose everything you have. You may lose your liberty. You may lose your life. It is a high stakes game. And I came out the other side not only unscathed, but cleansed and better than I entered, which you don't know what's going to happen when you make this sort of move. But for me, it was an opportunity to understand the nature of the system. There's very few people in the world that understand how to run for president. And that, I guess, applies to any major office. I understand all the things that one would need to know to be able to do such a thing. And so basic training is complete. And what that means is I'm also a plug and play politician. At this point, all my paperwork, which is no minor thing, is completed. All my filings, all my financial stuff, all the things which is not trivial is ready. I could effectively go run for any office I wanted tomorrow. I could run for mayor of New York City. And I've already done all the sort of like legwork necessary to get to that point.
And well, you got an incredibly great team behind you as well. I mean, Brittany Kaiser and Nick Spanos. I know Nick has worked with Ron Paul, and I'm a huge fan of Dr. Ron Paul. Shout out to Dr. Ron Paul and all that he has done to help wake up and educate people. So I know when we talked that you weren't really sure how everything was going to go with the presidential race. And now here we are today. And, normally we have an election day. That turned into election week, election month, and now we're at this really weird stalemate between political parties. What are your thoughts on how everything has turned out as far as the popular vote and all the stuff going on in regards with Trump and Biden kind of headbutting the Supreme Court stuff? And then I'd like to talk about the importance of blockchain voting.
Well, it's things have actually gone somewhat similar to what I had predicted back in May and June, and certainly once I entered the race. And I did put forward a very unlikely set of circumstances that would have created a path into the presidency for myself, potentially. Again, very unlikely, but understanding the nature of the rules of our election process. I said, did you know that you don't have to win the election to become president? And this is talking to major political experts. They're like, what? What are you talking about? I go, well, in the year 1800, Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr tied, meaning that no one got a majority of the Electoral College vote. Also in 1824, 4 people got Electoral College votes, meaning that no one got to a majority. And what happens when that happens? The House of Representatives under the 12th Amendment chooses the president. And I said it's possible in this election cycle that we might find ourselves there again. And when they have to pick the president, they pick the president from the top 3 candidates. And we got very, very close. I mean, I guess it's still conceivably possible that it could happen now, but we got very close to that very unlikely scenario happening. I mean, something that hasn't happened in nearly 200 years. And so that was the unlikely event that I predicted as a potential possibility. I said that this is not going to likely result in a very clear election result. And wow, I was close. And I was the only person in the world publicly talking about this and informing many of our elected officials and others that are in the political game, stating this very unusual event that hasn't happened in the US in nearly 200 years.
Yeah, and that is definitely an education for people who are unaware of that. And when you think about what's going on, what I'm curious about, when you had kind of thought about this in the past and brought this up before today, were you looking at the divide in our country as far as people who are supportive of the Democrats and supportive of the Republicans, or were you thinking more of the integrity of our voting system?
Well, I mean, it's all the things. It wasn't one thing that motivated me to run in terms of specifics, but it's one macro thing.
Okay.
And that is a deep concern about our collective future and watching the polarization happening in our country. And this is before Biden and Trump. This has been happening for a little while now, and where the left is, swinging further left, the right swinging further right. And it's possible that we're going to continue on this path, which is that the populist right and the populist left are going to dominate our election cycles, alienating a majority of us as Americans, those that are moderate and in the middle, that are live and let live and like willing to make compromises to find a collective path forward, knowing that unity is the answer for our future. We're not trying to eliminate one side or the other, but that's what's happening in politics. A vocal minority are dictating the future for all of us by being very threatening. They're the minority. We are the majority. Those of us willing to find a path forward together, even if we disagree on issues. Most of us are like, okay, we don't have to agree on everything, but because we're not the most vocal, because we're not the most passionate, many of us are not showing up in the primaries, and therefore the most passionate, the most vocal, the minority view is determining the candidates in the primaries. And then we're left with the circumstances that we have, which is why it's so important as Americans to recognize how incredible a privilege it is that we have this right to vote. And it's important that we vote for what we believe in, that we show up. Because if we don't show up, the future is going to happen to us, but without us having a say in it. The future is going to happen to you, or it's going to happen with you. And it is imperative that we participate in the process. The electing of our government, choosing those that govern over us, is so important. And so many people are not showing up in the presidential elections because they don't feel their vote or their voice counts or matters. And I assure you that it does. And not just in the presidential elections, this is like even more important in your local elections. You're electing of your local city councils. There's like 10% of the voting base is participating in those elections. It is so important that you participate in creating the future that you wish for. And so I just wish as Americans that more of us took this very sacred right, this privilege that we have, seriously. And I hope that through my running for office and saying these things, that I am encouraging you to participate. Now, another thing that you mentioned is the integrity of our electoral process. That's been called into question. Many Americans are questioning whether it is the system is operating with integrity. And if enough of us demand it, it will. This is again why it's important that we show up and make our voices heard, because it can. And thanks to technology, this can happen a lot faster. Blockchain or whatever technology solution it is, and there's more than one that could conceivably do this. We can bank from our mobile phones. We should be able to vote from our mobile phones, and we should be able to do it in such a fashion that we know that the integrity of the process is certain. And if something bad were to happen, that we can identify it. Technology does allow for that.
I totally agree. And when you mentioned what you said about the lack of people voting in different districts and just voting in general, when you see things like on the mainstream news with what's going on with the potential voter fraud and all that, that definitely causes more of a disdain for people who are already kind of on the fence about, does it matter if I even vote? So where do you think that blockchain voting will actually help, or something as far as a different technology will help with the integrity of our system? And do you agree that that is something that is much needed in today's day and age?
Absolutely. Technology is the answer. But those that don't want integrity in the system, those that don't want accessibility in the system, those that don't want you to participate, those same people that are trying to convince you that your vote doesn't matter, that your voice doesn't matter, because they're trying to discourage you from participating because they know that your participation could lead to their losing of control. Do not let anyone convince you otherwise. This country was founded upon this privilege, these sacred rights, and they are real, and we control what happens. We, the people. Let us not forget that. Technology is the answer, because it can help us identify whatever problem, because we're using technology. If there's a problem with the system, we are able to diagnose where the problem happened, what happened, who did it, what are the wrong votes. We can't do that with a paper ballot, but they're going to try and convince us that oh, no, that technology bad, technology not secure. We can build technological solutions that work. If we can do that with things like Bitcoin, if we can do that with things like digital dollars, if we can do that, we can do that with our voting. There's no question about it in my mind. There are multiple solutions to that problem. I know this. And the other benefit that it provides, and this is the part that's really scary for a lot of people, is once you can vote from your phone, it becomes easy for us to participate in this process. Many people will raise the concerns, well, yeah, if you make it too easy, then people that aren't informed will be voting. I beg to differ. I think once we make it easier, what we've done is we've brought more people into the system. And once people start to participate, they're more likely to take the time to become informed. And as we become more informed as a population, as participants in the process, I believe that will lead to better decisions and the right people ending up in office and elected offices. I believe that we will build a government of, for, and by the people. And so that is my firm belief. Technology, I'm certain about. And then in terms of driving accessibility, I believe inclusion and bringing more people into the fray, participating in the process, will lead to more informed voters, not less informed voters. That part is debatable, but I'm strongly on the side of let's get us all involved.
And I can agree with that. And I do like your perspective when it comes to that. And you did get to experience actually casting a vote on the blockchain in Wyoming. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience and process?
Well, I mean, it was one of the, I guess the great privileges that came out of this, and it was in Utah.
Okay, Utah, excuse me. I'm sorry.
We got to make history. The first vote ever cast in a general presidential election using the blockchain technology was cast, and it could have been a vote for anyone. And as it happens, that first vote was cast for me and my vice presidential running mate, Carla Ballard. And forever in history, we will be the first people to have received a vote utilizing this technology. And it's like one of those, like, you look back in life and you're like, 20 years from now, it's like, wow, we got to be that. And another cool aspect of it is this was the first vote cast in the state of Utah. So for a little while, about 12 hours, I had more votes than every other candidate combined. So I was winning the state by a long shot with all of one vote, mind you, but it still makes for a good story.
No, it definitely does. It definitely does. And hopefully people out there watching are laughing. It made me laugh. What's really cool about this though, too, is as far as the blockchain voting, I know Nick Spanos has several patents for blockchain voting, including patents that uses paper ballots and then logs them into a blockchain. Have you seen or experienced Mr. Spanos' any of his different blockchain voting softwares or patents?
Yeah, so Nick was on the campaign and we talked constantly. And I think that what the problems that he's trying to solve are spot on, which is really record keeping, right? Record keeping. And there's many aspects of where technology has a role to play in our electoral process. But certainly having clear records, pieces of paper, as we know with, call it the Internet of Information, when you can copy paste, when you can duplicate things, then you really need to have strong auditing at the ballot, in the ballots, and making sure that people are not, turning in 50 votes themselves. And I mean, there's a host of issues that, again, technology can solve for all of these things if we implement the right solutions. And there's more than one. This isn't like some holy grail type of issue. The technologies to do this already exist. We just need the right non-biased organizations, which is a big problem as well. Like when we look at the presidential debates, the debate commission is run by a Republican and a Democrat. We shouldn't be allowing the two political parties to control the presidential debates. I mean, that's ripe for problems. We should have a party that doesn't have a biased view from controlling that system, and it should be more transparent. It should be fair. And these are the things that I believe our country was founded upon. And so the system is rigged. I can actually summarize in one stat, because I could talk to you for hours about how the system is rigged against independent or third-party candidates. But this stat, I think, summarizes it really well. To run for president of the United States as a Democrat or a Republican, you need 25,000 petitions or signatures. As an independent candidate, you need 700,000.
Wow.
And by the way, that bar after every election keeps getting higher and higher. This is an area where the two major parties work together and are in alignment, which is let's only allow the American people to choose between red and blue. Let's not give them any other choices, and let's make it harder and harder for anyone to present an alternative from us. And that happens. I can give you another quick fact and figure which illustrates it in the case of New York.
Okay.
So in New York, to be on the ballot, you needed 15,000 petitions or signatures. And in April, in the midst of COVID hitting New York harder than anywhere in the world, what did they do? Did they decide to, well, since you can't collect signatures because of COVID, maybe we'll test electronic signatures? That kind of makes sense. Maybe we'll just lower it to 1,500 instead of 15,000. Or maybe let's do nothing at all. But what did they do? In April, they increased the number to 45,000 to ensure that anyone over those 4 years that was working on getting on the ballot would fail, that they wouldn't be able to reach the numbers necessary. And it gets worse. They also said for third parties that had already done the work in past elections, that have what's called ballot access, they can nominate someone. They said to the third parties, if you nominate anyone and put anyone on the ballot and you don't get at least 2% of the vote in this election cycle, your party is going to be disbanded forever. Basically telling them no one can go on the ballot. So our democratic freedoms, our electoral process is fully under threat. This is not, was the election, stolen or anything. I'm giving you stuff that is facts. You can't debate that. This is black and white stuff.
It's
This
definitely
is,
rigged. I would agree that it's rigged. And I mean, I would say I'm 45, and in my time, I think the only third party candidate I think that ever made an impact was Ross Perot. And that was because of the amount of money he had. It was kind of hard for him not to be heard. But I've interviewed Adam Kokesh, who was running as a presidential candidate with the Libertarian Party. I was going to interview Joe Jorgensen. But again, I mean, even them, the Libertarian Party is still having, like you're saying, the same problems. But I've not heard what you've explained to me in this little conversation explained at all by any Libertarian candidate, whether running for president, Senate, Congress, or whatever it is. So this is actually new to me. And it's very quite alarming. I know that it's rigged, but I didn't know how rigged it was. I didn't know the different things they were doing, like raising the bar every year, and what they did in April. That seems very, very, very unfair to third party candidates. But
well, Ross Perot, you bring up Ross Perot. Ross Perot was the last third party candidate to participate in the presidential debates in 1992.
mm-hmm.
It was the League of Women Voters that ran the debates back then. And because Ross Perot was allowed to participate in the debates, they stripped the women, the League of Women Voters, from being able to manage the debates. And they created a new debate commission run by the Democrats and the Republicans to make sure that a Ross Perot type was never able to get on that stage again. I mean, I can just go through story after story after story. And this is one of the benefits of someone like me running for office. I've been in the belly of the beast, right? I've gone in to see the working mechanics, the machinery. And I'm a gamer. You can't build a game, you can't build a system that I can't figure out some way to navigate it unless you make it impossible. It's not impossible. It's just improbable. They made it very, very difficult, and they continue to make it more difficult. But there's enough guys like me and enough amazing women like me that we can find a way. And I believe that change is coming. I am, we go through this. There's different groups from the independent movement, third party movements that have carried the torch for generation after generation. And those of us in our 40s and 50s or 30s right now, we're that next generation of torch bearers that are going to continue to put up, fight the good fight to make sure as Americans that we continue to have more choice. And as you mentioned, people like Ron Paul maybe didn't get elected, but that process and that platform allowed him to bring important topics and policies to the forefront of the conversation. Not everything is about winning. The process of running also can deliver and enable very good things. My campaign had a very strong platform on cannabis, and a lot of the things that I was talking about are now being implemented. And so, we'll never know how much what I did played a part in it, but we know that anytime we can move the conversation forward, good things can potentially come of it. And so I've committed my life to service. I'm going to continue to be supporting our political process as Americans to continue to fight for we the people. And I'm committed to doing that for the next few decades.
That's beautiful, man. Well said. And I always got to say, you always impress me with when you talk. I mean, you do say some very inspiring things, and you've also really impressed me with just the fact that you've been educating yourself about how this system truly works, to understand all these intricacies so that you can figure out how to gamify this and conquer it. I love it, man. I'd also like to get your kind of your experience when you were testifying in regards to legislature on banking and blockchain. Was that in Utah as well, or was that Wyoming?
Well, so I've been spending time with state legislators in Wyoming, Colorado, Utah, Idaho, and Alaska as part of this political process. Now Nevada, and I'm having conversations everywhere. One of the things that came out of my running for office is it's opened up a lot of doors for me with government officials that are like, oh, you're interested in service. You're interested in the future of this country. You care. I mean, these are things that, anybody that watched my campaign believes that it was authentic, even though cliche in some ways. People would be like, well, why are you running? And I said, I can summarize it in one word: love. Love for this country, love for the American people, hoping, and willing to work to build a better, brighter future for all of us. It sounds very cliche, but every person that I've interacted with can feel the authenticity of it. This is not something you do for publicity. There's a lot of ways to get publicity that are far less risky than stepping into the ultimate ring of fire. And it's like, okay, well, clearly you care. And you have a background in technology. Oh, you have a background in innovation. Oh, you have a background in currency, and understand how this could impact our future as a country. And so it's opened up a lot of doors for me to have conversations with others in our government on both sides of the aisle who do care. Our government is filled with a lot of good people. It's not all bad. The system itself is what's broken. It's not necessarily the people. I think good things are going to come of it. And there's definitely, to summarize why they're so interested, is the world is changing, and it's changing rapidly. A lot of it due to technology. And technology is neither good or bad, right? It's a tool. How we use it will determine the impact it has. And so places like Wyoming, the reason why they've become the leading state in the country when it comes to innovation, blockchain, banking, is because that's an economy that lived off of, coal principally and natural gas. And they know the writing is on the wall. Their primary source of income is going to go away. And they're like, well, we better do something new. And they've chosen boldly, bravely, and I think wisely, that innovation is the answer. And by creating legislation, by passing 19 laws, companies like Cardano and Kraken have moved there in part, potentially in full. And these are two of the leading financial services startups in the world, mega unicorns, and growing rapidly, as well as thousands, maybe 10,000 new companies have incorporated in Wyoming, innovative companies, in the last year alone. And when you start to show these facts and figures to other state legislators that are facing similar problems, that have the same dilemma on their hands, they're like, yeah, innovation, sign me up, because we're going to need new industries. We're living through the fourth industrial revolution, and there will be winners and there will be losers. And it will be determined by how we embrace that innovation. Do we nurture it? Do we bring it here? I mean, look at, Goldman Sachs, Deutsche Bank have announced that they might be moving a substantial part of their business out of New York to places like Florida. Oracle talking about leaving California. Elon Musk moving to Texas. States are going to have to start to compete. And it's, how do you nurture, these people that are, the titans of industry, the people that are bringing change and creating all the new jobs of the future. You have to start to actually treat these people fairly, ideally with some respect, and take the time to understand what they need, because these are the people that are creating our future jobs, our future sources of revenue, the industry that is ultimately going to determine the fate of our country. And those that have been the most well off historically are the ones that are doing the poorest jobs, because they're acting from a place of entitlement. They're like, yeah, we're New York, we're California. We can just tax you and tell you what to do, and we don't have to listen to you. We're going to tell you how it is because we're the boss. And states like Wyoming and Texas and otherwise are like, actually, what can we do to help you? What can we do to bring you to our state? How can we be of service? We'd like those jobs. And so you're starting to see the great exodus. These things are changing. And as the world changes, we're going to have to adapt with it. And we're seeing that, fortunately, within the country, because some of those same problems that we're seeing in New York and California, we see at a federal level as well. And fortunately, these small states, the Davids, versus the Goliaths, are actually leading the way. They're paving a path, which I think will ultimately lead to a brighter future for this country. And I'm so grateful to see the work that they're doing. The fact that they're listening.
It is a beautiful thing. And you mentioned the fourth revolution and change. We're at a really pivotal point in history, where we're seeing economically, we're seeing a lot of turmoil. We're seeing a potential collapse of our entire system. We're seeing Bitcoin hitting all-time highs. Where do you see the importance of the technologies like cryptocurrency and blockchain when it comes to changing the aspect of fiat currencies and things to that effect?
Yeah, so we're at a time in human history. Obviously, we don't have the benefit of hindsight, but as far as I can tell, this is like the most pivotal moment in human history. We face multiple very real existential threats, environmentally, politically, racially, conflicts with foreign nations because weapons and things. Clearly, where my background and where I'm best suited to speak to the issues is in the area of monetary policy and our economic systems. And I would make the argument, and again, I'm biased. When you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. That I think the fate of humanity is going to be determined by our monetary policies, by our financial systems, and I think that we're in trouble. And one of the areas that I wish to be of service, to our country, is how do we navigate this very challenging road ahead. One of the things that I started or co-founded back in 2013-14 officially was Tether. We digitized the US dollar. I said, we can use blockchain technology for central government currencies. We can do this for the US dollar. Let's build this as a proof of concept. It'll have a lot of utility in the industry. At the time, everybody thought I was crazy because back then everyone's like, we're not a fan of fiat. Why would we want digital fiat? Why would we want blockchain-based fiat? I'm like, well, I'll show you why. You're going to need it for a lot of reasons. But it's also going to show the rest of the world how technology has a role to play in our monetary system. That US digital dollar that Tether created, it's doing, $100 billion in transactional volume yesterday. That's $40 trillion a year in terms of run rate in transactional volume. Yeah, 40 trillion. These are big numbers. Mm-hmm. Governments around the world have recognized how technology can be used, and you have a number of governments and central banks looking at this now. China obviously is years ahead of the rest of the world with their new Chinese digital yuan. And again, technology is neither good or bad. How we use it will determine the impact it has. Obviously, the Chinese version is not in support of, call it, liberty and privacy. And the US is ultimately going to have to do the same thing as well. I think everybody that is, at least from the crypto world, understands where my views are, that I believe that privacy matters. I believe that liberty matters, and that I would be in support of a US digital dollar being created that, continues to preserve and protect our very important freedoms and liberties that we have as Americans. But it can be designed either way. And I hope that by my running for office, by talking about these things, pointing out the importance of these things, that we can architect that system in a way that protects these incredibly important freedoms and liberties that we have as Americans, that we don't divert away from the founding fathers' intentions for our future.
I would completely agree with that, and I definitely believe in the idea of a digital dollar. What I would kind of quickly like to ask is how you would feel if that was implemented in a way that they were trying to get rid of the paper money, the actual fiat money, and just completely go 100% digital, where we completely lose that privacy.
Well, it doesn't mean that we do lose that privacy. I believe that's what's going to happen. We will eventually leave paper money behind. I don't think that's going to happen quickly, and I'm not an advocate or a supporter of that happening quickly. But depending upon how we design that digital dollar, it can still have the privacy and anonymity. The question is, how do we design that system? Is it a system that preserves and protects the liberties that we have, that we were intended to have? Or is it more along the lines of what China has developed that strips or takes those things away from us? And I will continue and always be an advocate for the rights that we have. I want us to have more rights, not less. I am an advocate of freedom. I believe that is what America represents. It's clearly becoming less and less, but we still are that bright, shining light in the world. We still are the symbol of freedom. We still are the symbol of liberty. And I believe if enough of us continue to get involved in running for political offices, and if enough of us remember the sacred right we have to vote, and we elect the right people into office, we will always have that. Which again is why it's so important that we participate. The Treasury Department just put out some new rules yesterday, which are stripping us away of those privacies. They are hamstringing us in terms of our competitiveness in the world. We're living through the fourth industrial revolution. Right now, we need the top innovators in the world building things here. This action is going to push entrepreneurs and innovation away from America at a time where we desperately need more of it here. I think it's bad policy. I'm not happy about it. I hope that, whatever administration, and I hope that the filings that, people like Perry Ann Boring and the Digital Chamber of Commerce and others are going to be submitting in terms of comments, we make our voices heard. I think that this policy is bad for America, bad for our future, bad for our liberties. And in the end, it's causing great harm to the United States and our collective future.
I completely agree. And we talked about this a little bit yesterday. I was with Joel Telpner and Carol Van Cleef, and we touched on this as far as because it was really hitting the news circuit. And it is very alarming when you think of the fact that they're wanting to identify non-custodial wallets in whatever format, whether going into an exchange or such.
By the way, it shows a lack of understanding of what the technology is, right? All you're doing is you're not going to get what you're asking for. What you're doing is you're telling entrepreneurs it's not safe to do business or to build here. And as Americans that, you probably shouldn't own Bitcoin. Unfortunately, America isn't in charge. Maybe that's not unfortunate, but America's not in charge. We don't get to dictate anymore what is going to happen. We used to have that ability 50 years ago. We don't have it today. We have to realize that we share one planet. And what we need to do, back in the same way that Wyoming is competing, is we need to be nurturing innovation. We have to be encouraging innovation here. We want the leading technologies in the world that are going to be changing the world coming from here. We want the leading companies and organizations and innovators and engineers working and building here. If there's going to be a major wealth transfer in the world, we want that wealth transfer staying here. Why are we trying to push it away? Why do we want everyone else to be the biggest beneficiaries of this change? I want America to be a major beneficiary. I want America to be the biggest beneficiary of these changes. And that is a big part of why I'm showing up to do this work right now.
Well, is this an American thing, or is this a G7 thing? Is this a coordinated effort amongst like some of the most powerful nations that are trying to implement this in all their different countries and not just here in the United
yes,
States?
there's obviously many people that have a seat at the table that are encouraging this. But this is, and I don't want to point fingers, and I didn't run a negative campaign, but this is, a Treasury Department that is on their way out the door, trying to probably do some last minute favors that they'll be able to cash in later. It's not thoughtful. It doesn't show a keen understanding of the technology at all. And it's ultimately harmful to the United States. The only people that benefit from this is the incumbent financial system. This is doing favors for the big banks, at a time where, they're just trying to protect what they have. But the government's job is, to think about our collective future and not just to be beholden to, call it, the legacy incumbent system. Technology is going to change the financial system. Why is that US digital dollar so successful? Because you can send it 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, efficiently, cost effectively, and securely. You can't do that with banks today. It wouldn't be doing 40 trillion a year. We've built a better system. We've built new infrastructure. The legacy financial system is like coal and natural gas. We've built a better, faster, cheaper, more secure system. And that system, however it ends up evolving, whether it be Bitcoin, digital dollars, digital gold, whatever it is, that is yet to be seen. But there's no question that this type of technology is going to drive efficiency that makes it the future. Why would you want to cut the future off? This is, again, that fourth industrial revolution. We need to be a participant in it. This is the future. You're not going to prevent change. Change is coming. The question is, how do we respond to it? How do we adapt to it? And are we a beneficiary of it?
Right. And I mean, I've heard so much talk about legislation where they're saying they're not trying to stifle the technologies. They're just trying to regulate the technologies. But it seems like what they're doing, in fact, is just stifling the technologies. And like you said, preventing companies and businesses from wanting to actually operate in the United States because of all the unclearness on the regulations, on all the strictness and all the different things that they're trying to do. And it seems like it's literally just so they can have a more form of control. And they're not even thinking about the longer term picture or even the future of our country. They're just thinking about the current moment.
Yeah, when you're a hammer, everything again looks like a nail. There's not the visionary thinking. There's not visionary leadership in these conversations. People that are making these decisions are not adequately informed. And they're making decisions that are going to have a major impact on our future. And they're doing it half blind.
I would agree. I would agree 100%. And one thing I do want to ask you, and then I want to kind of open it up for you to talk about whatever you want. I'd like to kind of get your feelings on why you feel like decentralized blockchains and cryptocurrencies and technologies are so important in today's day and age, as opposed to what we've been dealing with the centralized systems.
Well, I mean, it's back to a philosophical view and one that has a political perspective in the United States. I believe in more power to the states, more power to the cities, less centralized power in DC. I want those people that have to live with the decisions they make to be making those decisions, people that walk or drive on those roads. You know, I think that distributed authority is better for this country and humanity ultimately. You know, this is a philosophical view. And it's not just a political view, it has to come from technology and otherwise. You know, what does a distributed system ultimately provide? It gets rid of central points of failure, meaning that we become, whether it be as a society or as a technology, we become more resilient. I think resiliency is a good thing. You know, wherever it is, we want resilient systems. You know, we've got natural disasters, we've got, you know, military potential conflicts, we've got all sorts of things. I want a more resilient system. I don't want an energy grid where one person can push a button and the power goes off, because that same capability can be misused by those that wish to harm us. So let's build resilient systems that can withstand attacks.
Well
And so
said.
it's a basic philosophical thing, and it makes a lot of sense. I want resilient energy grids. I want a resilient financial grid. I want a resilient system of governance. I want resiliency in our world at a time where we face very real threats. And that's effectively what this is, societally, technologically, in all ways.
I totally agree. And for anybody who's unfamiliar with what truly distributed ledger technology is, how would you explain that to somebody who's unfamiliar?
Well, I mean, there's a lot of ways, and I'll try to summarize it in the simplest way possible. You know, a DLT or a blockchain is just a slow, dumb, expensive database. And you're like, but why would anyone want that? That didn't sell it very well. Well, it has a few characteristics or attributes that makes it incredibly unique, something world changing. And that is that it's very resilient, that it's super secure, that information can't be any two places at once. You can't copy or paste it, which is why you can have a Bitcoin and people can't copy your Bitcoins where they can with a music video, a song, or a picture, or a piece of you know, language, words, whatever. So information can't be any two places at once. It's also immutable, meaning that you can't edit what has happened. History, or his story, has been historically written by the victors, meaning what we believe to be the past is probably not truth.
Oh my God.
And so this system allows what has happened to be recorded in such a way that no one has the power or the authority to edit reality. This, I believe, is the system of technology that is going to create an age of enlightenment, or an age of truth, where our actions and those things that have happened will be written into a ledger that is what it is. And that's going to present all sorts of challenges for us. I mean, as humanity, we're seeing it where, you know, our lives are becoming more and more public in pictures and social. And when we make mistakes, you know, we get attacked and there's cancel cultures, and we're going to have to, as a humanity, you know, as a society, we're going to have to eventually progress past that and get to the point where we realize that everyone makes mistakes. and we're going to have to learn to have compassion and to forgive, because what's going to happen as we enter this age of truth is that, everything that we do is eventually going to be known in some form or fashion, but hopefully with a sufficient amount of privacy. And these are the things that we're co-creating, which is why it's so important that we get involved, not just in our voting, but also in our voting for the systems that we use, those things that we adopt. Remember, every time you transact, every time you pull out your wallet, every time you watch the news, every time you log into a website, whatever it is that you're doing, an app, whomever you spend time with, you are giving power to something. And it's important that we are conscious and that we are aware of those things that we choose to empower. Because if we choose to empower the right things based upon the values that align with those things that we believe in, we will co-create a bright future for all of us. If we allow ourselves to be manipulated and to not think and to not be conscious and to continue to do things that cause harm to ourselves and others, that is the type of future that we will co-create, which is why it's so important that you think and that you participate consciously in the things that you do, the things that we empower, the things that we vote for, because we are doing that in all of our actions every day and every night.
We definitely are 100%. Well, we're down to about 8 minutes left. And I guess what I would like to do is just kind of open it up for a moment and kind of, whatever anything that we didn't talk about that you'd like to mention. Is there anything you want to touch on?
Well, it is the end of the year. And, we've just ended Hanukkah. Christmas is around the corner. Happy holidays to everyone that's tuning in. I invite everyone to take a moment to reflect on this year. The things that have gone well for you, the things that didn't go well for you, the things that you could have done differently. This was a year of everything in life, whatever challenge that we face is also an opportunity. And, to take a look at it. I used this, lemons that I was served, and I made lemonade. It was the most productive year of my life because I chose to make it such. I chose to stay positive, to operate from a place of.
I think we lost you. Hopefully he's going to be reconnecting here in just a moment. But I do appreciate everybody for tuning in, and I do want to wish everybody happy holidays. Hopefully we'll get Brock here in just a moment. And we do have another panel coming up in about 6 or 7 minutes, roughly. So stay tuned. And there is going to be an event happening tomorrow with the Blockchain Center as well.
Hey,
we got you. You're back. You're back. Yeah, can you hear me now?
Uh-oh.
No, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
It's starting to come back. I lost my internet there for a moment. Can you hear me?
I can. Can you hear me now?
Yeah. And so I was just, again, pointing out that, to continue to operate from a place of love. We live in essentially a binary world, fear and love, and to take a moment to reflect on this year and to set your intentions, for next year, to create those plans for your future. Where do you want to be at the end of next year? Where do you want to be 5 years from now? Where do you want to be 10 years from now? And obviously, the further out you go, you can't really have detailed plans, and you want to leave enough, call it flow, an ability to just kind of navigate the world ahead of you. But it is that time also for those of us in crypto that have been blessed with abundance. I'd like to remind everyone how challenging this year has been for many. There are a lot of people that are struggling. Over a third of small businesses in New York have failed, and that's probably true throughout many parts of the country. By the time this is over, half. This is the American dream. Families are struggling, and if you've been blessed, this is a good time to think about what you can give back, what you can do to support those causes, and those organizations that are out there doing good work. Obviously, do your diligence and to make sure that you're giving. One of the things I do right now when I'm at restaurants is recognizing how much these people are struggling. I tip better than I've ever tipped in my life. These are just little things. Knowing, that, we've been blessed, we're experiencing record highs with Bitcoin, but a lot of people are experiencing record lows, and not due to any real fault of their own. We're ultimately all in this together. And I think that's a good thing to remind everyone, set your plans, set your intentions, do your reflection, and if you're blessed, this is a great opportunity to do something good for others.
I love it, man. And when you think about things in the past, I mean, you've got 1% of the world that has more wealth than the rest of the world. And you're talking about us going into an age of enlightenment. We're in our final moments. I want to say, just on a personal end, we're 3 days away now from the winter solstice, 12/21. We've got some interesting alignments happening in space. There's all this talk about us going into this age of Aquarius. It's going to be a beautiful thing when we can start shedding these old ways and start actually living in a mentality of treating people how we want to be treated, and being the change that we actually want to see in this world, and working towards that greater good for everybody. Because it's really sad when you think about how many people are homeless and how many people are hungry when you have that 1% that is just sitting there, not helping out the rest of the world. So I would love to see us be able to transition into that better part of humanity, for everybody. And hopefully those people that are involved in those old traditional ways of thinking will start embracing newer ways of thinking. I'm hoping that 2020, as we are reflecting on how crazy this year has been, will give us an opportunity to say that we need to start anew, and we need to do new things, and we need to transition to a better, basically an involvement of our species. I think we need to evolve, and I think that we're kind of on that cusp right now.
Oh, I completely believe it. I mean, it's the year 2020. I like to think of these as the visionary 20s.
Yeah.
But I also believe that this is call it the beginning of the end of the age of the Great Deception. And they called the 1920s the Roaring 20s. I like to think of this decade as the Soaring 20s, as we emerge like the phoenix from the ashes, as we become more conscious of the fact that we're all in this together, and we have more compassion for our brothers and our sisters, for Mother Earth, who gives us life, and to walk in a better way, to be better stewards, better custodians. I'm confident that's coming. And yes, we've got the solstice around the corner, the Bethlehem star, Jupiter and Saturn. If you look out your windows, you can see this. I mean,
yeah.
You're watching each day, the planets are getting closer and closer, and they're about to overlap. We haven't seen anything like this in hundreds and hundreds of years. And I think it means something. I think a change is coming, and this is an opportunity to create
that's how close they are to
better
each other.
World, a new Earth together.
I don't know if you can really see that or make it out, but
yeah, I see it.
Jupiter and Saturn are right on top of each other. And yeah, it makes it the two big, huge planets coming that close together makes that one almost a one bright star. So it is pretty wild. And if anybody's ever been alive to experience it and wants to share, definitely reach out to me, because I'd like to know what we're going to experience. But Brock, I appreciate your time. I want to thank the Blockchain Center, and I want to make sure everybody stays tuned for the next panel that's coming on. And Brock, I know you're going to be running again in 2024, so make sure you Brock the vote in 2024 for Brock Pierce. Brock, thanks again. Happy holidays to you and your family. And I guess what I want to do is go ahead and pass it off. Hopefully they're ready for the next panel. And I look forward to speaking with you again, Brock, and I hope everything goes well with you for everything. And I wish you the best.
Thank you. God bless. Happy holidays.